The stage lights burned into my eyes, hot and unyielding, as my fingers hovered over the strings of my guitar. The crowd beyond the small wooden platform was a shadowed blur, their whispers slicing through the air like paper cuts. My heart thundered. Each beat a hammer against the fragile shell of my composure. This was the open mic night I'd spent months preparing for. The moment I was to bare my soul through a melody I'd written for Elise, the woman I thought I'd love forever. But now, with the mic crackling in front of me, the song felt like, "Oh, a lie, I wasn't sure I could sing. Next up, Nathan Reed." The host's voice boomed, snapping me back to reality. I adjusted my grip on the guitar, the wood slick under my palms. The song was called Northern Star, a love letter to Elise, inspired by the nights we'd spent stargazing on the outskirts of Willow Bend, Oregon, where I was born and raised. It was a small town where secrets didn't stay buried long, and dreams often withered under the weight of expectation. I'd poured everything into those lyrics, her laughter, her quiet strength, the way she'd made me believe I could be more than just a small-town mechanic with calloused hands and a restless heart. But tonight, everything had changed. Just hours. Ago, I'd found the text messages on her phone, not by snooping, but by accident, when her screen lit up while she was in the shower. A single moment that shattered everything. A string of texts between her and her ex, Caleb, laced with promises to meet up soon and keep it quiet. My chest had caved in, the air sucked out of me, as I read words that didn't belong in the life we'd built together. Now, standing here, I was supposed to sing about a love that felt like a betrayal. I strummed the first chord, the sound sharp and hollow in the crowded bar. The opening lines of Northern Star were meant to be soft, tender, a tribute to Elise's guiding light in my life. But my voice cracked on the first word, and I stopped. The crowd shifted, a murmur rippling through them. I could feel Elise's eyes on me from the front row, her silhouette unmistakable, even in the dim light. She'd insisted on coming tonight, saying she was proud of me, that this was my big moment. Proud. The word tasted bitter now. I cleared my throat and leaned into the mic. "Sorry, folks," I said, my voice rough. This isn't easy." A few sympathetic nods came from the audience, but most just stared, waiting. I glanced down at my guitar, the strings glinting like accusations. I'd written this song for her, but now it felt like a confession I didn't want to make. I thought about Willow Bend, about the gravel roads, the old oak tree where I'd carved our initials 2 years ago. I thought about my mom, who'd raised me alone after Dad left, teaching me to pour my heart into music when words weren't enough. She'd be in the crowd tonight if cancer hadn't stolen her last year. What would she say now? I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I could walk off this stage, let the silence swallow me whole. Or I could sing something else. Something true. The crowd was still waiting, and I realized this wasn't just about Elise or me. It was about all the folks out there who'd ever felt their heartbreak and still found a way to keep going. Maybe they'd get it. Maybe they'd hear me out. "Hey," I said into the mic, forcing a small smile. "I'm Nathan, just a guy from Willow Bend, Oregon, trying to make sense of things through music. If you like what you hear tonight, maybe give it a like, drop a comment, or subscribe to the channel. It helps keep stories like this alive." The words felt natural, like something I'd say to a friend over coffee, and a few people in the crowd nodded, their faces softening. It wasn't much, but it gave me the push I needed. I strummed a new chord, one that didn't belong to Northern Star. It was raw, unpolished, something I'd been messing around with in my garage late at night, when the pain of missing Mom or doubting Elise kept me awake. "This one's not on the set list," I said, my voice steadier now. "It's called Broken Chords. Bear with me." The first notes were jagged, like the edges of a wound. The lyrics came from somewhere deep, words I hadn't planned to share but couldn't hold back. I built a house on shifting sand, dreamed of love with trembling hands, but every note I played for you turned to chords that broke in two. The crowd leaned in, the murmur fading to silence. I closed my eyes, letting the music carry me. This wasn't about Elise anymore. It was about me. About the kid who'd grown up fixing cars in his mom's driveway, who'd learned to play guitar on a second-hand Gibson, who'd thought love could fix all the cracks in his life. Each verse peeled back another layer, raw and unfiltered, until I was singing about the moment I'd found those texts, the way trust shattered like glass underfoot. When I hit the final chord, the bar was so quiet I could hear the hum of the neon sign above the door. Then, slowly, applause broke out. Not the polite kind, but the kind that felt like understanding. I opened my eyes, my chest heaving, and saw Elise. She wasn't clapping. Her arms were crossed, her face pale, like she'd just heard every word I hadn't said to her face. For a moment, our eyes locked, and I saw something flicker there. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But I didn't care. Not anymore. I stepped off the stage, guitar still slung over my shoulder, and headed for the bar's back exit. The cool night air hit me like a slap, grounding me in the reality of what I'd just done. I'd bared my soul to a room full of strangers, rewritten my set list on the fly, and maybe burned a bridge with Elise for good. But it felt right, like I'd finally found my voice. Behind me, the door creaked open, and I heard her footsteps. "Nathan," Elise called, her voice soft but urgent. I didn't turn around. Not yet. I needed a moment to figure out what came next, whether I could face her, whether I even wanted to. The stars above Willow Bend glittered, cold and distant, and I wondered if Mom was watching, if she'd be proud of the man I was becoming. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stood outside the bar, the night air sharp against my skin. Willow Bend stars hung above, brighter than the neon glow of the bar sign behind me, but they offered no answers. My guitar case leaned against the brick wall, a silent witness to the storm brewing in my chest. Elisa's voice still echoed, in my ears. Nathan, soft, but laced with a desperation I wasn't sure I trusted. I hadn't turned to face her yet, my hands shoved deep into my jacket pockets, fingers curling around the worn pick I always carried. Part of me wanted to keep walking, to let the distance between us grow, until she was just a memory. But another part, the part that had loved her for 2 years, that had carved our initials into that oak tree, needed to hear what she had to say. "Nathan, please," she said again, closer now, her footsteps hesitant on the gravel. I could hear the tremble in her voice, the same one she'd used when apologizing for small things, like forgetting to call or leaving dishes in the sink. But this wasn't a small thing. This was a fracture, a fault line that had split our world apart. I turned slowly, the dim streetlight casting her face in half shadow. Elisa's eyes were wide, glistening with unshed tears, her arms wrapped around herself like she was holding pieces together. Her dark hair, usually so neatly pulled back, was loose and tangled, as if she'd been running her hands through it. She looked smaller somehow, not the confident woman who'd laughed under the stars with me, but someone caught in a lie she couldn't unspin. "What do you want, Elise?" My voice came out rougher than I meant, each word heavy with the weight of those texts I'd seen. "Meet me Friday. Don't tell Nathan." The memory burned, and I clenched my jaw to keep from saying more. I didn't mean for you to find out like that," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" I snapped, taking a step closer. "That you've been texting Caleb behind my back, planning to meet up like I'm some idiot who wouldn't notice." "When were you going to tell me, Elise? Before or after you broke my heart on stage?" She flinched, her hands dropping to her sides. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "Caleb and I, it's not like that. We're just friends now. He's been going through a rough time, and I was trying to help." "Help?" I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. "You call sneaking around helping? You call lying to me helping? Don't insult me, Elise. I saw the messages. You weren't just catching up. You were hiding something." Her face crumpled, and she looked away, her gaze fixed on the ground. For a moment, the only sound was the distant hum of traffic and the faint music leaking from the bar. I waited, my pulse pounding, hoping she'd say something to make this make sense. But the silence stretched, and with it, the realization that maybe there was nothing she could say. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said finally, her voice small. "I swear, Nathan, I wasn't trying to betray you. Caleb reached out a few weeks ago. He's been struggling since his dad passed, and I felt bad for him. I didn't know how to tell you without making it a big deal." "So you decided not to tell me at all," I said, my voice low. "You thought keeping secrets was better than being honest with the guy you're supposed to marry. That's not how this works, Elise. That's not how we work. I know, she said, her voice breaking. She took a step toward me, her hand reaching out, but I stepped back. Her hand fell, and something in her eyes dimmed. I messed up, okay? I should have told you. But it wasn't anything romantic, I promise. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. I wanted to go back to this morning, before I'd seen those texts, when I'd still believed in the future we'd planned. A small house on the edge of Willow Bend, a porch swing, maybe a kid or two. But trust is a fragile thing, and once it's cracked, you can't just glue it back together and pretend it's whole. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice softer now, the anger giving way to something heavier. If it was so innocent, why hide it? Why make me feel like I'm not enough? She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know, she admitted. I was scared. Scared you'd think I still had feelings for him. Scared you'd pull away. I thought I could handle it on my own, keep it separate from us. But I was wrong. I'm so sorry, Nathan. Sorry. The word hung between us, thin and inadequate. I thought about my mom, how she'd always said apologies were only as good as the actions behind them. She taught me to look for truth in people's choices, not just their words. And Elise's choices, hiding those texts, laughing in the crowd while I poured my heart out, spoke louder than any apology. I ran a hand through my hair, the cool night air doing little to ease the ache in my chest. I don't know if I can do this, I said, the words tasting like ash. I don't know if I can trust you again. Nathan, please, she said, her voice desperate. We can fix this. I'll cut Caleb off completely. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't walk away. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd loved for 2 years. But I also saw the cracks. Her need to please everyone. Her fear of conflict. The way she'd always sidestepped hard truths. I'd ignored those things before, chalking them up to quirks, but now they felt like warnings I should have heeded. I need time, I said finally. I can't make promises right now, not after tonight. She nodded, her shoulders slumping. Okay, she whispered. I'll wait. However long it takes. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my guitar case and started walking toward my truck, parked at the edge of the lot. Each step felt heavier, like I was leaving something behind I'd never get back. Elise didn't follow, but I could feel her eyes on me, a weight I carried all the way to the driver's seat. As I drove through Willow Bend's quiet streets, the town felt both familiar and foreign. The diner where Mom used to take me for pancakes, the garage where I still worked, the old water tower painted with the town's name. They were all pieces of a life I'd thought I'd share with Elise. Now they were just reminders of how quickly things could change. I pulled into my driveway. The small bungalow dark, except for the porch light I always left on. Inside, I set my guitar down and sank onto the couch, my mind replaying the night. The song, the crowd's applause, Elise's tears. They swirled together, a melody I couldn't untangle. I thought about calling my sister, Clara, who lived a few towns over, but it was late and I didn't want to burden her with this yet. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened the notes app where I kept song ideas. My fingers moved before I could think, typing out fragments of a new verse. Stars don't lie, but hearts can stray. Promises fade in the light of day. I'm searching for truth in the songs I sing, hoping my broken chords still ring. Writing. It felt like breathing, a way to make sense of the chaos. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and wondered what Mom would have said. Probably something about listening to my heart, but not letting it drown out my head. She'd always had a way of cutting through the noise. A knock at the door jolted me upright. My first thought was Elise, but it was too soon for her to show up here. I crossed the room and opened the door to find Mara, my old high school friend, standing on the porch. Her red hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she held a 6-pack of beer, her expression a mix of concern and determination. Heard you killed it at the open mic, she said, her voice light, but her eyes searching. Also heard you might need a friend, am I right? I managed a small smile, stepping aside to let her in. Mara had always been there. Through Mom's illness, through my doubts about music, through everything. Maybe tonight she'd help me figure out what came next. The living room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of a single lamp on the side table. Mara sat cross-legged on the couch, a beer bottle dangling from her fingers, her red hair catching the light like a faint ember. I leaned back in the armchair, my own beer untouched. On the coffee table, the weight of the night still pressing against my chest. The silence between us wasn't heavy, though. It was the kind of quiet that comes with years of friendship, where words don't need to rush to fill the space. Mara had always been good at that, knowing when to let me breathe. "So," she said finally, her voice cutting through the hum of the old radiator. "That was some performance tonight. Broken chords? Where'd that come from?" Her green eyes studied me, not pushing, just waiting, like she already knew half the story, but wanted me to tell it anyway. I ran a hand over my face, the stubble rough against my palm. "I don't know," I admitted. "It just came out. I was supposed to play Northern Star, but after what happened with Elise, it felt wrong, like I'd be lying to myself if I sang it." Mara nodded, taking a sip of her beer. "I heard about the texts. Word travels fast in Willow Bend." She gave me a small, sympathetic smile. "You okay?" I wanted to say yes, to brush it off like I always did when things got tough. Growing up in Willow Bend, Oregon, you learn to keep your head down and keep moving. Fix the car, pay the bills, don't make a fuss. But Mara wasn't just anyone. She'd been there when Mom got sick, when I'd stayed up all night in the hospital, strumming my guitar in the waiting room to keep from falling apart. She'd seen me at my worst and never flinched. "Not really," I said, my voice low. "I thought Elise was it, you know? The one. And then I find out she's been texting Caleb, sneaking around like I'm some fool. It's not just the texts. It's that she didn't trust me enough to tell me." Mara tilted her head, her expression softening. "People mess up, Nathan. Doesn't mean she doesn't love you, but it also doesn't mean you have to forgive her right away. Or at all." I looked at her, surprised by how easily she cut to the heart of it. "You think I should just walk away?" "I think you should do what feels right for you," she said, setting her beer down. "Not what Elise wants, or what Willow Bend expects, or even what I think. You've always been the guy who fixes things. Cars, problems, other people's messes. But maybe this time, you need to fix yourself first." Her words hit harder than I expected, stirring up memories of Mom. She'd said something similar once, when I was 16 and heartbroken over my first girlfriend. "Nathan," she told me, sitting at our old kitchen table, "you can't pour all your light into someone else's cracks. Save some for yourself." I hadn't understood it then, but now it felt like a lifeline. "I miss her," I said suddenly, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Mom, she'd know what to say about all this." Mara's face softened further, and she leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "I miss her too. She was the best. Remember how she'd sneak us cookies when we were supposed to be studying?" She laughed, a quiet, warm sound that eased the ache in my chest. Or how she'd pretend not to notice when we stayed up all night playing music in the garage. I smiled, the memory vivid. Mom had always loved music, even when she was too tired from working double shifts at the diner to do much else. She'd bought me that second-hand Gibson when I was 12, scraping together every penny she could. "It's your voice, Nathan," she'd said. "Don't ever let it go quiet." "There's something I want to show you," Mara said, breaking the silence. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook, its edges frayed, its cover faded to a soft gray. "I found this when I was helping Clara clean out your mom's storage unit last month. I wasn't sure when to give it to you, but tonight feels right." I took the notebook, my fingers brushing the familiar handwriting on the cover. Lila Reed. My throat tightened as I opened it, the pages filled with her neat, looping script. It wasn't just a journal. It was a collection of lyrics, fragments of songs she'd never shared. Some were about love, some about loss, others about the quiet beauty of Willow Bend's rivers and hills. Tucked between the pages was a folded piece of paper with my name on it. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Read it," Mara said gently. "It's for you." I unfolded the paper, my hands trembling. The letter was dated a month before Mom passed, when she was too weak to leave the hospital, but still stubborn enough to write. Dear Nathan, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But I hope you know you were my greatest song. You've got a heart bigger than this town, and a voice that can carry it. Don't let anyone, love, doubt, or fear, make you play it small. I wrote these songs for me, but they're yours now. Finish them if you want. Or write your own. Just keep singing. I'll be listening. Always. Love, Mom. I blinked hard, the words blurring as tears stung my eyes. Mara reached over, squeezing my arm. She believed in you, Nathan. More than anyone. I nodded, unable to speak. The notebook felt like a piece of her, alive in my hands. I flipped through it again, stopping at a half-finished song titled River's End. The lyrics were raw, about finding peace after a storm, about letting go without losing yourself. It was like she'd known I'd need this tonight. Don't know what to do with this, I admitted, my voice thick. It's like she's still trying to guide me, but I'm so lost right now. You're not lost, Mara said firmly. You're just finding a new path. And you don't have to figure it all out tonight. But that song you sang, Broken Chords? That was you, Nathan. Not Elise's Nathan, or Willow Bend's Nathan. Just you. Her words settled over me like a warm blanket, but before I could respond, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Elise's name lit up the screen, a text that read, Can we talk tomorrow? I'm not giving up on us. My stomach twisted, the fragile piece of the moment shattered. Mara glanced at the phone, then back at me. You don't have to answer that now, she said, but you do have to decide what you're carrying forward, her or you. I stared at the screen, the weight of Elise's words pulling me back to the bar, to the texts, to the betrayal. But then I looked at the notebook in my hands, at Mom's letter, and something shifted. Maybe Mara was right. Maybe this wasn't about fixing Elise or our relationship. Maybe it was about finding the chords that still rang true for me. Let's open another beer, I said, setting the phone face down. And maybe you can help me read through some of these lyrics. Mara grinned, a spark in her eyes that reminded me why we'd been friends for so long. Only if you play one for me, she said, nudging my shoulder. Deal. Deal, I said, a small laugh escaping me. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A note in a new song I wasn't sure I was ready to write, but one I knew I had to try. The garage smelled of oil and metal, a familiar comfort that grounded me as I tightened. A bolt on a rusted Chevy pickup. The morning sun slanted through the open bay door, casting long shadows across the concrete floor of Reed's Auto, the shop I'd taken over after Mom passed. My hands moved on autopilot, but my mind was elsewhere, on the notebook Mara had given me, on the lyrics of River's End that had kept me up half the night. I'd strummed a few chords on my Gibson before dawn, trying to weave Mom's words into something new, something that felt like mine. But every note seemed to pull me back to Elise, to the texts, to the question I couldn't answer. Could I forgive her? The clatter of footsteps on the gravel outside snapped me out of my thoughts. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked up, expecting a customer. Instead, Elise stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the morning light. She wore a simple blue dress, the one she knew I liked, and her hair was pulled back, neat and deliberate. In her hands, she held a small wooden box, her fingers clutching it like a lifeline. My stomach twisted, a mix of anger and longing I hadn't expected. Nathan, she said, her voice soft but steady. Can we talk? I set the wrench down, the clank echoing in the quiet garage. You shouldn't be here, Elise, I said, my tone colder than I meant. I told you I needed time. I know, she said, stepping inside, her eyes darting around the familiar space, tools scattered on the workbench, the old radio Mom used to hum along to. But I couldn't wait. I needed to see you. I crossed my arms, leaning against the truck. What's in the box? She hesitated, then held it out. It's for you? Something to show you I'm serious about fixing this. I didn't move to take it, my gaze fixed on her face. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she hadn't slept, but there was a determination, There I hadn't seen last night. Part of me wanted to tell her to leave, to keep the distance I'd fought for. But another part, the part that remembered her laugh, her hand in mine under Willow Bend stars, couldn't look away. "Open it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Please." I took the box, its weight heavier than it looked. Inside was a small, hand-carved star, polished smooth, with our initials, N and E, etched into the wood. Beneath it was a folded letter, written in her careful handwriting. My chest tightened as I recognized the star's design. We'd seen one like it at a craft fair last summer, and I'd said it reminded me of our stargazing nights. She'd remembered. "I made it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Well, I had help from Mr. Larson at the wood shop. And the letter, it's everything I couldn't say last night." I unfolded the letter, scanning the first few lines. "Nathan, I've never been good at saying the hard things. I thought keeping Caleb's messages a secret would protect us, but I was wrong. I broke your trust, and I'll spend every day proving. I'm worth it again, if you'll let me." I stopped reading, the words blurring. "Elise," I said, my voice rough, "a letter and a carving don't undo what happened. You hid things from me. You made me feel like I wasn't enough. And no," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was stupid. I thought I could handle Caleb on my own, that it wouldn't touch us. But I see now how much I hurt you. I cut him off, Nathan, completely. I blocked his number, told him never to contact me again. I want us to work." I set the box on the workbench, my hands shaking. "You think that's enough? You think one gesture fixes the fact that you laughed while I was falling apart on stage?" She flinched, her hands twisting together. "I wasn't laughing at you," she said. "I was nervous, trying to keep things light because I didn't know how to handle it. I'm not perfect, Nathan. I mess up, but I love you. I've always loved you." Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, but weighed down by doubt. I thought about Mom's notebook, the lyrics of River's End I'd been working on. "Let the current carry what's done. Find peace where the river runs." Could I let this go? Could I trust her again? Or was I holding on to a love that it no longer fit? Before I could answer, the garage phone rang, shrill and insistent. I ignored it, but Elise glanced at it, then back at me. "You should get that," she said softly. "I'll wait." I shook my head. "No, we're doing this now." But the ringing persisted, and with a frustrated sigh, I picked it up. Reed's Auto. "Nathan, it's Clara." My sister's voice crackled through the line. "You? Okay, I heard about the open mic, and... Elise!" I glanced at Elise, who was watching me with a mix of hope and fear. "I'm fine," I lied, "just dealing with some stuff." "Want me to come over?" Clara asked. "I can be there in an hour." "No, it's okay," I said, my eyes still on Elise. "I'll call you later." I hung up, the silence returning like a heavy fog. Elise took a step closer. "I don't expect you to decide right now," she said, "but I'm not giving up. I'll keep showing you I mean it, every day, until you believe me." I didn't respond, my mind caught between her words and the notebook waiting at home. I'd spent the morning sketching out a melody for River's End, Mom's words blending with my own. The river don't judge, it just flows, carrying heartache where nobody knows. Maybe that was what I needed, to let the current carry this pain, to find a way forward without losing myself. "I need to think," I said finally, my voice steady but tired. "I can't promise you anything, Elise. Not yet." She nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I'll be here," she said, then turned and walked out, leaving the box on the workbench. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the carved star. It was beautiful, a gesture that would have meant everything a week ago. Now, it felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer. Later that afternoon, Mara stopped by the garage, a coffee in each hand. "Figured you could use this," she said, handing me one. Her eyes landed on the wooden box, and she raised an eyebrow. "Elise?" "Yeah," I said, sipping the coffee. "She's trying!" Mara leaned against the workbench, her expression unreadable. "And you? What are you trying for?" I thought about the notebook, the song I'd started. I'm trying to find my voice again, I said. Mom's lyrics, they're helping. I started working on River's End this morning. It's like she's still here, guiding me. Mara smiled, a quiet pride in her eyes. That's what Lila would have wanted. You, singing your truth. Want to play it for me? I hesitated, then nodded. Not here, though. Tonight, at my place. Bring your guitar. We'll jam like old times. Deal, she said, her grin widening. But only if you promise not to hog all the good chords. I laughed, the sound surprising me. It wasn't much, but it was enough to carry me through the day, toward a night of music and maybe a few answers. The porch light flickered as I tuned my Gibson, the familiar twang of the strings cutting through the cool Willow Bend evening. Mara sat across from me on the old wicker couch, her own guitar resting on her lap, its worn finish catching the light. The night was quiet, save for the distant chirp of crickets and the occasional rumble of a passing car. My bungalow's porch had always been my sanctuary, the place where I'd first learned to play, where Mom would sit with a glass of iced tea and hum along. Tonight, it felt alive again, like the music might stitch together the pieces of me that Elise had left scattered. Ready? Mara asked, her green eyes bright with anticipation. She'd brought her old Martin, the one we'd used to mess around with in high school, back when we'd dream up songs about escaping Willow Bend. Her red hair was loose now, curling over her shoulders, and there was a warmth in her smile that made the ache in my chest feel a little less heavy. Ready as I'll ever be, I said, flipping open Mom's notebook to the page with River's End. The lyrics stared back at me, her handwriting a mix of careful loops and hurried scrawls, like she'd been racing to capture the words before they slipped away. I'd added a few lines of my own this morning, trying to make the song mine, but it still felt like a conversation with her. Let's start slow, Mara said, strumming a soft G chord. Give me the vibe. I nodded, my fingers finding the opening notes. The melody was simple, raw, like the river itself, steady, but carrying something deeper. I sang the first verse, my voice low. The river don't judge, it just flows, carrying. Heartache where nobody knows. I stand at the edge, where the shadows mend, finding my way to the river's end. Mara joined in, her fingers dancing over the strings, adding a harmony that felt like a second heartbeat. Her voice wove into mine on the chorus, soft but sure, and for the first time in days, I felt like I was breathing again. The music wasn't just sound. It was memory, grief, hope, all tangled together. I could almost hear Mom's voice in the notes, urging me to keep going. That's it, Mara said when we paused, her grin wide. You're onto something, Nathan. It's like Lila's in there, but it's you too. I looked down at the notebook, my throat tight. I want to finish it, I said. For her, but it's hard. Every time I sing, I keep thinking about Elise, about what happened. Mara set her guitar down, leaning forward. That's why it's good. It's honest. You're not hiding. From the hurt, you're putting it into something real. She paused, her eyes searching mine. You know, back in high school, you were always the one who could turn a bad day into a song. You've still got that. Her words hit me, stirring up memories of late nights in her parents' garage, scribbling lyrics on napkins, laughing, until we couldn't breathe. Mara had always been there, steady and unflinching, even when I doubted myself. I looked at her now, really looked at her, and felt a flicker of something new, a warmth that wasn't just friendship. It startled me, and I pushed it down, focusing on the notebook instead. Let's try the second verse, I said, clearing my throat. I added something last night. We played through it, tweaking the chords, letting the song take shape. Mara suggested a bridge, her fingers picking out a haunting melody that gave the lyrics room to breathe. We lost ourselves in it, the hours slipping by until the stars were bright above us. For a while, it was just us and the music, the world beyond the porch fading away. Then my phone buzzed, shattering the moment. I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropping. A text from an unknown number. Hey, it's Caleb. We need to talk. About Elise. I stared at the words, my pulse racing. Mara noticed my expression and leaned over, her brow furrowing. Who's that? She asked. Caleb, I said, my voice tight. Elise's ex, the guy she's been texting. Mara's eyes widened. What does he want? No idea, I said, setting the phone down like it might burn me. But I don't trust him. Or her, not completely. Not after everything. Mara hesitated, then reached for her beer, taking a slow sip. You don't have to respond, she said. But if he's reaching out, it might mean something's up. Maybe you need to hear him out, if only to know what you're dealing with. I shook my head, the anger from the open mic night flaring up again. Why should I? He's the one sneaking around with my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, I corrected. The word bitter on my tongue. What could he possibly have to say that I'd want to hear? Maybe nothing, Mara admitted. But maybe it's closure. Or a chance to see who Elise really is. You're the one who said you need time to figure things out. This might be part of it. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. She was right, as much as I hated it. Ignoring Caleb wouldn't make the questions go away. But the thought of facing him, of hearing whatever excuse or explanation he had, made my skin crawl. I thought about Mom's letter, her words about not letting fear make me play small. Maybe this was part of that, facing the truth, even if. It hurt. I'll think about it, I said finally, my voice low. But not tonight. Tonight I just want to play. Mara nodded, picking up her guitar again. Fair enough. Let's finish that bridge. We dove back into the song, but Caleb's text lingered like a shadow. As we played, I kept glancing at the phone, half expecting another message. Mara must have sensed it, because she kept the music going, her voice steady, anchoring me. When we finally set our guitars down, the song felt closer to complete, a fragile thread connecting me to Mom, to myself. You're gonna play this at the next open mic, right? Mara asked, her tone teasing, but her eyes serious. Willow Bend needs to hear it. Maybe, I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. If you're there to back me up. Always, she said, and there it was again, that flicker of something more, in the way her eyes held mine a moment too long. I looked away, my heart thudding, unsure if I was ready to name what I was feeling. As Mara packed up her guitar, she paused at the door. Nathan, she said, her voice soft. Whatever happens with Elise, with Caleb, with all of it, you're enough. Don't forget that, I nodded, the words settling deep. Thanks, Mara, for everything. She smiled, then stepped into the night, leaving me with the notebook, the song, and a decision I wasn't ready to make. I picked up my phone, Caleb's text still glowing on the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but I couldn't bring myself to type. Instead, I opened Mom's notebook again, letting her words guide me back to the music, to the one place where I still felt whole. The diner was nearly empty, its worn red booths and chipped formica tables a stark contrast. To the chaos in my head, I sat in the corner, my fingers drumming on the coffee mug, the bitter brew long gone cold. Caleb had picked this place. Neutral ground, he'd called it in his follow-up text. I hadn't wanted to come, hadn't wanted to give him the satisfaction of a face-to-face, but Mara's words from the jam session echoed, maybe it's closure. So here I was, in Willow Bend's oldest diner, waiting for the man who'd cracked open my life with a few secret texts. The bell above the door jingled, and Caleb walked in, his broad shoulders hunched like he was bracing for a fight. He spotted me and nodded, sliding into the booth across from me. His face was drawn, eyes shadowed. Nothing like the cocky guy I'd imagined when I'd first read those messages. He looked tired. Nathan, he said, his voice low. Thanks for meeting me. I leaned back, arms crossed. Didn't have much choice. You said we needed to talk. So talk. He exhaled, running a hand through his dark hair. I owe you an apology. I didn't know Elise was keeping me a secret. I thought you knew we were talking. I raised an eyebrow, skepticism sharp in my chest. You expect me to believe that? You were texting my fiancée, telling her to keep it quiet. Caleb shook his head, his jaw tight. That wasn't about hiding from you. It was about my family. My dad's death hit us hard, and my mom's been a mess. I didn't want her knowing I was leaning on Elise for support. It wasn't romantic. I swear. His words landed like stones, heavy, but not quite convincing. I thought about Elise's letter, her carved star, her tearful promises at the garage. Then why didn't she tell me? I asked. If it was so innocent, why lie? Caleb looked down at the table, his fingers tracing a scratch in the surface. She was trying to protect you, I think. She said you were still grieving your mom, that you didn't need more stress. I told her to be honest, but she thought she could handle it on her own. I laughed, a bitter sound that made the waitress glance over from the counter. Protect me? By sneaking around? That's not protection, that's betrayal. I get it, Caleb said, meeting my eyes. I'd be pissed too, but I'm telling you, it wasn't what you think. I'm not trying to get her back. I just needed a friend, and Elise, she's always been good at listening. I stared at him, searching for a lie in his expression, but all I saw was a guy who looked as lost as I felt. It didn't erase the hurt, didn't make Elise's choices okay, but it shifted something. The anger I'd been carrying felt less, like a fire, and more like a weight, one I wasn't sure I wanted to keep holding. I don't know what to do with this, I said finally, my voice quieter. But thanks for being straight with me. Caleb nodded, standing up. For what it's worth, she loves you. She's a mess over this. Whatever you decide, just don't let it eat you up. He left, the bell jingling again as the door swung shut. I sat there, staring at my coffee, Mom's words from her notebook circling in my mind. Let the current carry what's done. Find peace where the river runs. Maybe this was the current, facing the truth, letting it flow through me instead of fighting it. That night, I sat on my porch, Mom's notebook open, my Gibson in my lap. River's End was nearly finished, the final verse coming together after days of wrestling with the melody. Mara had helped shape it, ease her harmony giving it wings, but it was Mom's words that anchored it. I strummed the opening chords, letting the song fill the quiet. The river don't judge, it just flows, carrying heartache where nobody knows. I stand at the edge, where the shadows mend, finding my way to the river's end. The final verse was mine, born from the diner, from Caleb's words, from the ache of letting go. I've held too tight to what's been lost, paid for love at too high a cost, but the river still calls. It won't let me drown. I'll find my way up when the world pulls me down. I played it through, the notes steady and true. And when I finished, the silence felt different. Fuller, like the song had carried something away. I thought about Elise, about the star on my workbench, about the life we'd planned. I loved her, or at least I'd loved who I thought she was, but love wasn't enough if it meant losing myself. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at it, expecting another text from Elise. Instead, it was Mara. Open mic tomorrow. You playing River's End. I'll be there. I smiled, the weight lifting, just a little. Mara had been my anchor through this, her presence steady where Elise's had faltered. That flicker of something more was still there, but I wasn't ready to name it. Not yet. The next evening, the bar was packed, the crowd buzzing with anticipation. I stood backstage, my guitar slung over my shoulder, Mom's notebook tucked into my jacket. Mara was in the front row, her grin a beacon in the dim light. Elise was there too, near the back, her face half hidden, but unmistakable. I hadn't responded to her last text, hadn't decided what to say. But tonight wasn't about her. It was about me. The host called my name, and I stepped onto the stage, the lights warm against my skin. Hey folks, I said into the mic, my voice steady. I'm Nathan, from Willow Bend, Oregon, just trying to make sense of things through music. If you like what you hear, give it a like, drop a comment, or subscribe. It helps keep stories like mine alive. The crowd murmured, a few nods rippling through. I strummed the first chord of River's End, and the room fell quiet. The song poured out, raw and real, carrying Mom's words and my truth. Mara's harmony echoed in my head, even though she wasn't singing, and I felt her strength in the notes. When I hit the final chord, the applause was warm, genuine, like they'd heard every piece of me. I stepped off the stage, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Elise approached, her eyes searching mine, but before she could speak, I held up a hand. I need to do this on my own for a while, I said. I'm not saying never, but not now. Her face fell, but she nodded, stepping back. "I'll wait," she whispered, then turned and left. Mara was waiting by the bar, her guitar case slung over her shoulder. "You killed it," she said, her smile bright. "Lila would be proud." I nodded, the notebook heavy in my pocket. "Thanks for being here," I said. "For all of it." "Always," she said, and that flicker was there again. A possibility. I wasn't ready to chase, but couldn't ignore. As we walked out into the Willow Bend night, the stars above felt closer, like they were listening. I didn't have all the answers, but I had my music, my truth, and a path that was mine to walk. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video. It helps more people discover heartfelt stories like this. Drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you felt, what resonated with you, or if you've ever faced something similar. Subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart. Every week, new tales of resilience, love, heartbreak, and hope. Your support keeps these voices alive. Thank you.